A hot sun burns down on the mountains of southern Nevada, and that same hot sun bears down on the gambling mecca that is the Las Vegas Strip. And just a few yards off Las Vegas Boulevard is a new race course. Not the Grand Prix circuit that we've known for the past 2 years, but a brand new 5-turn, mile-and-an-eighth distorted oval. It's the scene today for not the Grand Prix road racers, but the drivers of the Indy cars of CART. It's time for the Indy cars to race in Las Vegas for the first time. All rookies, all new track records. We're here in Las Vegas with 26 cars sitting on the main straightaway as they prepare to run the first Caesars Palace 200. And typical of the Las Vegas style, to start the engines here today, comic Joan Rivers.
Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines.
The command given to lady and gentlemen to start your engines, recognizing that Desiree Wilson is part of this starting field. There's John Paul Jr. on the pole in his last year Penske PC10. Alongside in a march is Teo Fabi, the winner of 2 races this season. Chip Ganassi replacing Gordon Johncock in the number 20 STP car, and Derek Daly, who drove this circuit as a Formula One driver last year as teammate to KK Rosberg. Rick Mears finally putting a win on his list, winning the last race at the Michigan 200. And now the field, all engines are started. John Paul pulls away leading the field. Then is the starting grid for the Las Vegas 200. On the pole, in car number 12, a PC10, is John Paul Jr., winner of the Michigan 500, his first pole position.
And alongside him is number 33, the green and white Teo Fabi, one of the fastest rookies to ever come to Indianapolis car racing, and the winner of the Pocono 500.
The inside of the second row at car number 3, the car Alola, the driver, Mario Andretti, who finally notched a win in CART at Elkhart Lake this year.
And alongside him, car number 90, Derek Daly, certainly one of the finest road racers here today from Formula One cars.
On the inside of the third row, car 21, Pancho Carter. He's been working hard on the road circuits and has been rewarded with a good qualification run here.
And on the outside of the third row, number 66, Pete Halsmer, driving for one of my old bosses, Frank Arciero, came up through the Super Beats.
On the inside of the fourth row, car number 2, Bobby Rahal, the promising rookie from last year, now has added a third win to his CART scorecard.
And on the outside, car number 18, former Can-Am champion, Jeff Brabham, very experienced road racing driver.
On the inside of the fifth row, in car number 7, is Al Unser Sr. He is the man that is leading the PPG points race this season and hopes to keep that lead alive.
And on the outside of my brother is number 20, driving John Cox's car, Chip Ganassi, one of the most promising young oval and road racing drivers.
And here is the rest of the starting field. 26 cars start. 3 of them are powered by production-based engines, the rest by the Cosworth racing engine. And at the back of the field, 2 former Indianapolis 500 winners, Rutherford and Sneva, accounting for 4 Indy 500 wins between them. The rookies on the front row as John Paul brings the field down. The green flag in the hands of the starter, Nick Bernoro, and Teo Fabi starts off in front as John Paul Jr. comes down to the inside. Derek Daly closes up in third. John Paul holds Fabi off on the outside, and the field is safely through the first turn as Kevin Cogan lights his brakes hard. There's John Paul Jr. out in front now. Derek Daly has moved into second. Fabi has dropped back to third.
Well, it's too early to tell what's going to happen, Paul, but it looks like John Paul is handling very good early on in the race, but it also looks like Derek Daly's going to be coming up pretty strong.
John Paul Jr. now hard on the brakes as he comes around that 5th and final turn to complete lap number 1. So lap 1 will be scored with John Paul out in front. Derek Daly moves up from the second row to pick up second place, and Teo Fabi drops back into third. Bobby Rahal is in fourth now. John Paul Jr. on this very tight first turn that does require a great deal of braking. And one of the questions here today, Bobby Unser, is how much the cars will use the brakes.
Well, the brakes are going to get used an awful lot today, Paul. It's a very hard course on the brakes. And one thing, there's not very much fresh air. Everything.
We got a problem. Michael Andretti spinning off of the first turn. This is his first IndyCar start. Not a great way to start the day for Michael Andretti.
Well, at least nobody hit him, Paul, so the boy's pretty lucky at this point.
A nice clean spin. The course stays green. He's back in competition at the back of the field. John Paul still leading. Derek Daly still second as Mario Andretti now comes around Bobby Rahal and slides into fourth place. So Andretti moving up.
Mario's working very good. He's been moving up very steadily, but most important is to watch Teo Fabi just slowly going back. Now let's see if Mario gets around Teo.
Mario Andretti closes down behind the Skoal Bandit. Andretti in a Lola. That's a March that Fabi is driving. The Lola has had its problems this year, but not here today as he closes right down behind Teo. They come onto the main stretch again. Let's see if he can get by.
It might be worth noting both these guys are Italians. We're going to have an Italian war, and Mario's going to win it. Look at that.
Mario Andretti right on the inside of Fabi, gets past in the first turn, and now sets his sight on the second place car of Derek Daly. There's John Paul Jr. in that bright red number 12 as he's closing down behind the field already, and directly in front of him is the sole lady driver in the field, Desiree Wilson.
You might know, Paul, she's being lapped already. It's awfully early, so she must have gotten off to a pretty bad start.
Desiree Wilson now as the leader comes around, and John Paul Jr. continues to pull out. We've got another problem. Here is Scott Drayton, car number 37. He just did a quick spin and came off the course. Now, will that bring the yellow out? As John Paul Jr. still out in front and closes down on Johnny Rutherford, who is having a terrible time with his car and just doesn't seem to get it handling at all. The yellow flag is out as a result of Scotty Drayton's spin.
I suspect there's something wrong with Johnny, Paul, because it's awfully early for him to get lapped. He might be having trouble today, but that's too many problems.
From high atop the Fantasy Tower of this 5-turn distorted oval, 1 1/8 mile around, as John Paul Jr. comes around the last turn, the green flag ending the yellow flag period, and John Paul in the lead, but Mario Andretti able to sneak by and come into second place, and now coming up to challenge John Paul on the inside. Andretti pushes Paul to the outside, but Paul maintains his position. Andretti still in second. The VDS car well out in front now as Andretti drops back a bit. This is the fastest section of the course in the early going for John Paul Jr. Andretti seems to just have to sit back and watch.
Well, Paul, I think most of that is because Mario's probably carrying a little bit more wing than John Paul is, which gives John just a little bit more on the top end. Mario, notice, gets into the turns just a little bit deeper.
Andretti gives it a pitch under heavy braking as he comes through the 5th turn in pursuit of John Paul Jr. That's Daly back in 3rd place. Now Andretti comes on the inside. They're almost together as Andretti forces John Paul to the outside and picks up 1st place.
That's a good example of having more downforce, Paul. You get into the turns a lot further, but you don't go down the straightaways quite as fast.
Andretti, car number 3, almost off the course, is using up every inch of this circuit here. There's his son, Michael Andretti, who is down in the back of the field as a result of that spin in the early going. Mario Andretti in front. John Paul second. Derek Daly is in third. And Teo Fabi is on the pit road. Gary Gerald is waiting in his pits.
Well, Teo Fabi's crew had to run back and push the car in after he stalled coming in through the pits. They've taken the starter to the rear of the car. No indication as of yet as to what the problem may be. Looks like they may have to take the cowling off. This is serious trouble here for a 2-time winner this year. The little Italian Teo Fabi may be out of the running in the early going in Las Vegas.
At the same time that Teo headed in, Johnny Rutherford was in and out for a stop as well. Mario Andretti leads, John Paul Jr. in second. Derek Daly with a fine drive continues in 3rd place.
Well, as you can just see, you got 3 road races right in a row, Paul, so I have to think that we're going to have to call this thing a road race course.
Well, it seems to be so at the moment. In fact, Mario Andretti, we must remember, a former world driving champion on road circuits. Teo Fabi, they now begin to disassemble that march. Teo stays in the cockpit, but obviously the problem is very serious, and Teo desperately needs the points if he is going to continue in his battle with Al Unser for the PPG World Series.
They're giving up, Paul. They're not going to get him back out. He's getting out of the car.
So as Teo Fabi climbs out, John Paul now closes his pursuit of Mario Andretti. John Paul Jr., the leader in the early going, now closing down just a bit, but Andretti manages to pull away a bit on the main stretch.
And here's a fight for third place. Derek Daly and Jeff Brabham, and they're going at it tooth and toenails, having a good fight.
So the front of the field locked in battle right now. Andretti leads. In second place is John Paul Jr. There you see the interval, first to second. And back in third place, Derek Daly fighting with Jeff Brabham. Johnny Rutherford back in.
And Johnny Rutherford back into the pits. Just one lap ago he came in, he changed the tires, got some fuel, went back out just for the one lap, came back in. Now they're looking at the car. They're trying to take the hood off the car. They're bringing it up on the jack. So problems for Johnny Rutherford here in the early going here at Caesars Palace.
And Bobby, look at the disappointment on Rutherford's face there. He's really upset.
That's the epitome of disappointment, Paul, believe me.
Johnny Rutherford, the man with a bad season, appears to be out of the competition here in Las Vegas. Out in front, it's still Mario Andretti. He is still being chased by John Paul Jr. as Andretti works his way around the back marker, Dick Simon. And now John Paul Jr. has to contend with Simon. He moves out and around as well. The position of back markers like Simon on a tight, short course like this can become critical for the leaders as they move around. Andretti leads John Paul.
You notice John's pulling right back up again on the long straightaways, Paul.
The leader is still having a car spinning on the pit straight. It's Tom Sneva. He gets it under control. There's a flash fire at the turbocharger. That's common. It doesn't create any danger for Sneva. But the rest of the field slows now, an anxious moment, as the rest of the cars had to come off their normal line to the inside of the pit straight to get by Sneva. And little Al comes in, the Coors Bullet. Here comes Mario Andretti right behind it. So in the pits right now, it's the battle of the beers. Andretti comes into a stop. All of the cars now acknowledging the yellow, and it's a good time for their stops.
The Coors Bullet's out first.
So John Paul Jr. stays on the course. He picks up the lead. Andretti coming out of the pits now, lights the tires, pitches it sideways, almost gets into the side of Kevin Cogan.
Well, they came close to having one right there in the pit, Paul. I think that's going to be a pretty lucky thing.
Very close, as Andretti now back into competition under the yellow. Let's look. Here's Kevin Cogan as he was coming into pits. There's Andretti coming out, and Andretti had to throw the car to keep from hitting him.
I'll bet they didn't miss over 6 inches.
So now under the yellow flag, John Paul Jr. comes into the pits. That will scramble the scoring at the front of the field. Here is Jeff Brabham in. He was in 4th place before this stop under the yellow. And the yellow flag is out as Bobby Rahal now picks up the lead under the yellow as a result of the spin by Tom Sneva on the main stretch, but Sneva is back underway. There's trouble down at the first turn. Desiree Wilson pulled her car off the course. Now they're spraying the fire chemical on her. Apparently a fire in her car, and she's now gesturing to the corner workers.
I think what she's asking for, Paul, is water. You know, the chemical has gotten to her throat, to her eyes. I think she wanted water thrown on her.
So Desiree Wilson now on her knees, and apparently a fire in her car. They were under the yellow at the time. Now they're sending the corner worker over to take a look at the car as well. Here are the cars out of the race to this point. Of course, we talked to Johnny Rutherford a moment ago. Gearbox problem there. Teo Fabi out with an engine problem. And Scotty Brayton had a broken wheel, spun off the course. Desiree Wilson now being loaded into the ambulance for a trip to the hospital. It did not appear that she was seriously burned or injured, but definitely a problem with Desiree's car. Now Bobby Rahal leads Pancho Carter down to the line. In 3rd place is Jose Legarza as the green flag comes out again. And Carter comes out and alongside. See if he can get past Rahal, easily past Rahal and into 1st place. That's Steve Chassie out in front of the field. He is a back marker. And now another car spinning off of the 5th turn. It's Dick Simon as he slides backwards and just off the edge of the course.
Yes, and there's really not too much wrong with it. The smoke you see coming from his engine, there's nothing but the oil and the turbocharger. There's really not too much wrong with the car.
So it looks like Dick Simon will get back. Here's another car off the course. Steve Chassie, who was right in front of the leader. He's off the first turn. So 2 cars off. The yellow flag is out here at Las Vegas. And the Morales brothers have to be pleased with their driver, Pancho Carter, who has that Alex Foods March out in front. This is Paul Page with Bobby Unser, and we're back in Las Vegas for the Las Vegas 200. Our leader, Mario Andretti, and he has a wonderful lead ahead of the battle for second place, which has now developed between Jose Garza and John Paul Jr. Here comes that fight as John Paul comes to the inside, approaching turn 5, and John Paul moves past Garza, picks up second place.
That was a good pass. That's where most of the cars have been passing all day, Paul. I think we've had more passing there than all the other places total.
Well, John Paul Jr. has had a frantic but a fantastic run as he's worked his way back from that earlier penalty of a black flag stop and go. John Paul Jr. in second place. Here's the 4th place car. Kevin Kogan, as Kogan locks the brakes, tries to get it around the corner. Kogan off the end. Kogan smacks the barrier.
Terrible deal, terrible. He should have turned to the right, Paul. He could have missed those tires so easy. I just don't know why. I guess he had a bad indecision point.
Well, the barrier may be well placed for the course, but poorly placed for Kevin Kogan. Mario Andretti comes around. The yellow flag flies in the first turn, and the caution is on once again. So we'll be back with more. The battle at the front should close. In the meantime, Rick Mears is in the pits. Let's go down to Gary.
Paul, Rick Mears has had a continual problem. The car has been locked in 3rd gear. They finally had to remove the rear wing assembly that was rattling loose. They're trying to get him back under power and back on course. Roger Penske and Mears trying to protect their number 3 position in the season-long point standings.
Mears goes back to the battle without the benefit of a rear wing. Tom Steva in for what should be his last stop as well, but there's some smoke pouring from the cockpit.
Well, he's definitely got something burning, Paul, but it looks like it's blown itself out. I don't think there's any problem right now.
Routinely, that does happen. Tom Steva rolls back to the fight. Here's our leader. The number 3, Budweiser Lola of Mario Andretti, out in front of John Paul, but John Paul beginning to close down now. As he screams down the straightaway, the starter gives the blue flag, indicating that there is faster traffic behind as a slower car.
Steva's on fire again, Paul. That fire didn't blow itself out. It's still going. It looks like it's a very serious fire right now.
Tom Steva already throwing his straps away. The wheel is detachable and comes out. He throws the steering wheel out of the way.
Oh,
a furious fire there on the right side.
That big fire. That car's burning. It looks like maybe the oil cooler caught on fire and got back on.
Tom Steva may be hurt. The fireman goes past Steva, doesn't even pay any attention to him. He may still have fire on his uniform. You can't see an alcohol fire. And now the fireman is over fighting the fire in the car as Steva collapses on the wall.
There's one of the cardinal sins of the firemen. They're always supposed to go to the driver first. It's a terrible mistake to make, but it's been done before.
Well, the firemen here are pickup. They're not regular to the season. The truck that just pulled up is the regular CART fire team and medical team. Tom Steva appears all right. As he gestures over to the fire crew, apparently he sees some more fire on the ground. Something possibly leaking. The yellow flag obviously out. Tom Steva saves himself from disaster.
Well, it's a sad thing. These firemen, he's obviously all right, but these firemen have got to learn to go to the race drivers first. After all, their life has got to be a heck of a lot more important than the doggone cars. We can see in the slow motion that Tom's undoing his belts, and we can definitely see that the fire is coming from the right side front of the car, where the driver's going to get the most heat and really the most dangerous. Also, it's very close to the fuel cell.
Tom actually had to put his hand down into that burning fire. That shows you how good that Simpson safety equipment really is. Apparently uninjured. Now the regular CART crew is there. Steve Edwards, Dr. Steve Alvey, and David Crippen there to help Tom Steva. They're a very trusted unit, and the CART people are very happy to have them around. Well, this yellow coming so close to the end of the race now sets up John Paul in a position to close on Mario Andretti. The green flag's out. Problems off in the 5th turn on the restart. Peter Halsmer spins, comes around, gets alongside Roger Mears, and it's lucky that we didn't have a tragedy there, but the green flag stays out and we continue racing.
That's one of the closest calls we've seen all day today, Paul. I don't know. There's a car off into the dirt.
Steve Chassie comes off the course.
I think he's been there before. This is not the first time.
Oh, having trouble getting restarted, but again, the green flag continues to fly. Mario Andretti is out in front, and John Paul Jr. is right behind him.
Well, we're having a good race now. Look at the dash for first place. This is going to really be a good one.
Yellow really came at the right time for John Paul Jr. Dick Simon pulls off the course, apparently failing on the main stretch, but he's out of the way.
I reckon Mario's glad to see him pull into the pits.
Andretti lights his tires under braking. Can John Paul get past? John Paul takes the inside line, and John Paul Jr. goes into the lead.
Well, looks like Mario's brakes were probably a little bit cold, and he used them a little too hard that early after the yellow, Paul.
So the lead goes away from Andretti. John Paul Jr. seizes the opportunity, much in the same way that he did at the Michigan 500 on the last lap, driving past Rick Mears. So here he is again, out in front. But Andretti is determined to close.
Boy, I'll guarantee you one thing. This is going to be the contest between an old-timer and a rookie. The pressure is going to be on John Paul like you just can't believe.
John Paul, as he comes back to the first turn again, Andretti closes a little bit more. I'm sure that all he sees in his mirrors is that big number 3 closing and wondering how is he going to keep a former world champion back. Here was the problem with Andretti.
Well, here he is, just great, but he lets off, see? Totally the opposite of what Kevin Kogan did. Mario let off his brakes at the last minute so it would start turning. Because as long as the wheels are locked up, it just won't turn in any direction.
Unfortunately, he was just a little too far out, and John Paul was able to sneak by. But here's Andretti as he continues his pursuit of John Paul Jr. And John Paul, perhaps on his way to his second CART victory this year.
Well, not yet, Paul. Mario's pulling up on him, and I'm telling you, the pressure's going to get bad. Now, if John is going to make a mistake, John Paul make a mistake, it's going to be because Mario's working up. Look how close he's getting there.
John Paul darts to the inside of Roger Mears, and Andretti comes right down behind him. Now Andretti in a position to attack. They come through the backstretch, through the fourth turn. Now John Paul down hard on the brakes. Andretti darts a little bit to the left. Andretti pulls alongside, and Andretti forces his way past John Paul. The lead goes back to Andretti.
That was the best pass we've seen all day long. I don't care what they say about the passes. That was a very calculated risk.
Perfectly clean by Andretti as he forces his way past John Paul. Now the game back to John Paul. Can he pursue Andretti and pull the same move in reverse?
I don't think so, Paul. I really have to go with the experience. Mario has it, and I just think he has more downforce than John Paul does. It's just going to be tough.
So you go for the better handling car, the experienced driver. On the other hand, John Paul Jr., that PC-10, has been working very well for him in the faster section of the course. And we have to remember, when he went up against the experienced Rick Mears in Michigan, he was able to bluff Mears into the wrong place at the wrong time and go on to win the Michigan 500.
But keep in mind, Mario's handling better where you can pass on this track, and that's really going to be what's going to guarantee him the faster car.
Little Al bottoms out just a bit, scrapes some sparks off the back as third place Chip Ganassi goes past. Ganassi having a marvelous ride today. Little Al back in the field, well down. Here comes Peter Halsmer chasing Ganassi, and Halsmer hits the brakes hard and forces Little Al off the course. Al slides to a stop in the sandbox, doesn't get into the barrier. Now in the closing laps, they will not be able to move Al's car away from that position. John Paul continues his pursuit of Mario.
Terrible, unfortunate thing for Little Al. So close to the end of the race to get knocked out like that.
The white flag. Nick Finaro, the starter, shows it to the leader, Mario Andretti, and to John Paul Jr. in second place. A little less than a mile now if John Paul Jr. is to get past Mario Andretti.
I don't think so, Paul. He's losing ground, but by the same token, remember, the mechanical difficulties could happen any time. It's happened to me many times, and it could happen to Mario.
Mario Andretti now with slower cars in front of him between he and the checkered flag as Andretti comes alongside Steve Chassis. Chassis doesn't see him, but Andretti gets past. Chassis almost turned into him. Now John Paul Jr. comes off the corner, but Mario Andretti wins the Las Vegas 200. John Paul Jr. comes across the line in second place, and that Budweiser crew begins a celebration as Carl Haas, the owner, begins throwing kisses to everybody. Here's the checkered flag now for Chip Ganassi, finishing in third place. And Al Unser Sr. comes across the line in fourth, adding to his points total in the World Series. But right now, the day belongs to Mario Andretti, winner of the Las Vegas 200 in front of a crowd over 22,000 strong.
I'll say another thing, that last turn was awfully close and very risky, but I'm glad he got by. He did a nice drive all day.
Andretti has just won the Caesars Palace 200. The car owned by Paul Newman and Carl Haas, Alola, for the second time this season has proven its worth. It started with a very tough season for Mario, but now it's in winner's circle once again.
Well, Mario, we'll give you a chance to get a sip of a cool drink. There's that familiar grin. The second time this year we've seen it. Now, this turned out to be a heck of a battle in those last few laps.
I think it was a battle right from the beginning for me. It just seemed like I had the car and I was just, I just wasn't getting all the brakes. I had to really work for it, but it's one of those things that just worked right at the end. I had some problem with the brakes grabbing once they cooled off. That's why I was really worried about the yellow, and I knew the jump ball was right on my butt, so I couldn't afford to pussyfoot, and I locked it all up. At the end, I figured, oh, this is it. But man, I said, I'm going after it now.
How tough was it once you said you got to go after it to come back and get it there again?
I don't even remember. All I saw was red.
The win worth almost $70,000 for Mario Andretti. John Paul Jr. in second place. A fine ride for young Chip Ganassi, who came home in third, and Al Unser Sr. continues his lead in the points with his finish.